Tosca. I'd like to invite Dr. Mitchell back up to the podium. So we have about 10 minutes before our tea and coffee break. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Our two panelists have very kindly agreed to respond to them.
I'm sorry, yes. I'm confused about the function of the press and the publisher. Do they both publish?
Okay, historically, university presses printed things for their universities. When I was an undergraduate, there was a university press, and they had a line and type machine, they had a printing press, and they would print the campus newspaper. They printed all sorts of forms for the university. They printed the catalog of courses for the university. And this was something that helped support the publication of books and journals, because they would be paid something for doing this other printing work. What happened then is that the technology changed. The printing presses today are massive, and they're extraordinarily expensive. I mean, you're talking maybe about $10 million for a printing press. And the university presses cannot afford to buy them. In fact, the only way this works, we'll have a printing company somewhere. They're probably printing books, popular magazines, and think about all the things that get printed. You go to the shop, you buy a light bulb. It's in a package, and that's got printing on it. So these commercial presses do all kinds of printing. The university presses outsource printing of books and journals to commercial presses, because it's the only way it can be done now. But we still call ourselves a press, even though there's no more printing press. But we're publishers, which means that we receive manuscripts, we process them, and we prepare the material. And there's another curious word in here. We still talk about typesetting. But typesetting is actually done by you when you type your article. So what we have to do is layout. But most publishers still talk about layout as typesetting. So it's just kind of terms that still hang around.
And actually, Singapore is actually one of the biggest presses. The whole country invested heavily in presses. They do most of the children's books for US.
Yeah, Singapore has a lot of big commercial presses. And some of them specialize in very high quality colored work. Others, well, a lot of them have specialties. Some, like well, one of the things that's kind of died out. It used to be a lot of presses would publish annual reports for businesses, and some of these were big printing jobs. And now most of this is done through electronically online. So even these presses are struggling to find enough material to print. But anyway, the printing is outsourced. You go to the University Press of the University of the Philippines, and they have this whole floor of old printing presses that haven't been used in years.
Thank you.
Other questions?
About your explanation about citation next, I would like to ask, from the journal point of view, if you accept a submission, a manuscript or submission that to your journal that cite few articles of your journal, do you take into the account of that, or simply
Good question.
Yeah, so she's asking about citation indexes. So if somebody sends an article, and that article cites a lot of other articles from our journal, does that help? And the answer is no. No, let me just add to that. One time I received an article from somebody who said, when I was doing my research, I realized that a lot of the material I was reading came from the Journal of Southeast Asian Studies. So I thought this would be, it's a topic you're interested in because you have published on that before. And so I thought this would be a good place to send it. And that was correct. So the fact that the journal has published on a particular area, and okay, he was citing our article, but that didn't help him get published. It's irrelevant from the decision-making point of view. I mean, obviously it's nice, but it doesn't affect the decision.
Sometimes, I think in journals, particularly ones that are of lower quality, you see a lot of gaming. So occasionally, I mean, I've heard of stories of some editors who will say, oh, you cited my journal 10 times. If this paper gets published, it raises my impact factor. So, but I think once you get to the really high quality journals, it doesn't make a difference. They get so many papers, they don't care. They're looking for quality research.
I mean, for one thing, the decision about publishing will mostly be based on the peer review. And the reviewers are not going to be looking for that issue about, oh, have they cited this journal a lot.
I'm going to talk about that impact factor on libraries just a second, because one of the factors that has happened is we in the U.S., we have a lot of control. I like your journal, the scientific journal. One time when I was at the University of Wisconsin, the Journal of Brain Research cost $25,000 a year. That was my whole Philippine budget. So all the money I had to spend on the Philippines was one journal in brain research. So, but I think one of the dangers of some of this numbers games gets played out because those impact factors then, you have to have these journals because they have high impact factors, and the money gets scooped up, and then we also have a similar sort of thing, almost the opposite. They call it the long tail in publishing. That things get published, most of the publishing will happen in the first curve, and then it'll just go on and on. And Amazon changed the way bookstores work because they can cover the long tail, whereas most bookstores can only cover that immediate, what happens right now. But universities then must focus on this impact factor by somebody's rules. And that your smaller little university journal that might be just what you want for Eastern Indonesia or the Moluccas gets ignored because we're spending our money on a high impact journal.
You know, one of the things I should add, something that's kind of disappeared is a lot of small publications like working papers, occasional papers, and so on. And I think what's about to happen is that some of that may come back. I mean, they disappeared because they weren't economical. I mean, you publish 50 copies of something and nobody's going to send in for it anymore, so they just sit there. But if they're put online, then it's possible to distribute those things. But there's something else happening that is really interesting. All this stuff we're talking about is pretty much in English. And so what is happening in Europe at a time when university presses around the world are struggling is that there have been, just in the past 10 or 15 years, about 30 new university presses have been created in Germany. And what are they doing? They're publishing open access, and they're publishing in German. And they're saying, well, maybe we should not worry so much about all the ranking stuff. Why should we shut out all German language publishing? Because that's effectively what's happening. And so one of the things that, if you look around Asia, in most every country, there's sort of two sorts of things going on academically. One is international and in English. And then there's another set of research topics which are more of local interest. And so in Thailand, you have Thai language publishing. In Indonesia, you have Indonesian language publishing. In China, Chinese language publishing. And these publications are dealing with issues that are important in the country. And so it exists all around Asia, but in Europe, there was this tendency that, okay, if you're in France, you used to publish in French. Now, okay, everyone's got to publish in English because that's the way you get recognized. In Germany, the same thing. Now there's a reaction against that. So I think what you're going to see going ahead is a return of something like occasional papers or working papers. You're also going to see the emergence, this is already happening, of publications of about 30,000 words. Because in the old days, you had articles of up to 10,000 words, you had books starting around 50 or 60,000. So there's a big hole in there. And part of the reason was that economically it didn't work for publishers to publish a 30,000 word book. But it does work to publish it online, maybe print on demand if you want a physical copy. And Oxford, I think, was the pioneer in this, Oxford University Press. And if you go to a big bookstore that handles Oxford University Press books, they have something called a short introduction to. And they have rack after rack after rack of these things. And they're about 30,000 words. Cambridge has now started up Cambridge Elements. And they have one on Indonesia, one on Singapore, one on ASEAN. And these are also about 30,000 words. And professors say, you know, this is wonderful because if I assign a 60,000 word book to students, they don't read it. But if I'm a 30,000 word thin little book, the students look at that, yeah, I might actually read that. So this is definitely going to grow. This kind of mid-range thing, 25 to 30,000 words.
It'd be good if, you know, one of you are sitting out there is, we really don't know much about knowledge production in this country. And really how it works and who it works with. We really don't, I mean, we have our anecdotes, but we clearly don't know. I mean, and I think if I remember that RISTEC is starting to do sort of its own little scopus work and has some analytics on it. Indonesia likes your infographics, so it's got it there. But I do think it's something that warrants, you know, how is knowledge production, who does it? Vermedia, I heard something quite worrying about Vermedia. You know, all of you, I assume through your university, you can all get into all of Vermedia's books and, you know, the Vermedia Online, and they've got OBOR publications. They've got a very good list of journals. I think they've got some tempo. If you go on, in most of the universities, it's digital. You can't. It operates differently than it does, and we're trying to negotiate to get it to the U.S. systems. But one of the things I heard about that was they're testing first as E. And if it doesn't go, they're not going to bother printing. Which is quite worrisome to me, because in the Library of Congress, we talk about the first copy that we collect. And generally speaking, except for in journals now, it's still print. Because we really don't know, 100 years ago, are we going to be able to regenerate and do it? So the print copy is still the copy of record for the Library of Congress. So if Vermedia decides that it's going to test every publication with you as the audience, and if it doesn't reach a certain readership on their e-site, they're not going to bother a print. That's quite problematic.
Well, I have a friend who was working for the Library of Congress in the computer division. And somewhere around the year 2000, his assignment was to try to recover the material the Library of Congress had digitized in the 1980s because it could not be read any longer. So today, there's been progress about that. So if you have a journal article that's digital, it will have a digital object identifier, which is supposed to stick with it. But I mean, what is a digital article? It's electrons, right? Poof, it's gone. Everybody's lost something on their computer, I'm sure. You shut it down, oh, I didn't save that, and it's gone. And all this digital material could go.
Okay, with that happy song.
Yes. On that happy note, since we're all perhaps a little bit less happy than we were 5 minutes ago, there's tea and coffee outside, and I'm sure there's sugar to go with it to lift your spirits again before we come back. We'll be coming back and starting at, Yusuf, at 2:45. So 2:45 the break ends and we'll start the next session. Thank you.